see. Should I can stop sharing and then we can take some questions.
I think that's a good idea. I have a question. You may have touched on it briefly, but what you had your idea of how a longhouse would be used before you built it, and you learned things by building it and using it. What was the biggest surprise that you came across when actually or building the longhouse?
One of the biggest surprises for me was the amount of wood you go through if you're going to cook meals, breakfast and dinner or supper. You really go through a lot of wood, and it practically takes one person to keeping an eye on the wood and keeping the fires going. What we didn't talk about was that we built an oven to bake bread, and that was outside of the longhouse. It was a separate building, and so we actually had two fires going, and then we had the blacksmith going. But yeah, that was one thing that was surprising.
Does anyone have questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment on this is CC, on the short bed. That was standard throughout the medieval times and universally until you got clean air to sleep in. As long as you've got smoke in the air, you're going to want to sit up when you sleep just to keep your lungs clear.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And one of the things, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised at how smoky it was when we first tried it. We had some rough times at first until we got better at building the fire and a better supply of wood. We found out a lot about wood quality that I never had managed to learn despite building a lot of fires and fireplaces at home, and despite having done a lot of primitive camping with Girl Scouts. I still learned a great deal about outdoor cooking by trying it in the longhouse. It's really fun though to be able to do outdoor cooking, so you can still do it if it's raining.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments? One question I have is, when you made that, I know power tools are not Viking, but the hand tools, did you use modern hand tools, or did you try to use primitive Viking hand tools? Or is there a great difference between the hand tools the Vikings used and what we'd buy at Home Depot today?
When I took the class at Vesterheim, Cora Herfindahl used an electric chainsaw. The guys there, about half of the class was pretty experienced woodworkers, and they looked at that electric chainsaw and they said, "Oh, that's dangerous. We got saws, we got chisels." So we built our first building with hand tools.
Mm-hmm.
I have done both. I've used power tools. I've done hand tools. And it doesn't matter. It is quicker if you use a power tool, an electric chainsaw. The eventual outcome is pretty much the same. It really doesn't matter. It's just a question of how much time do you have and how much effort you want to put into it.
The other part of the question, though, the Viking tools actually looked a lot like ours. Probably the biggest difference was the drill, because they had to use a pump drill. They didn't apparently have the bit and brace. But
yeah, the pump drill was used for smaller things. The bigger one, they had a shoulder actuated.
It would have to have a strap, a bow drill.
Yeah, but I actually have not made a reproduction of that particular drill, so I don't know how well that works. The bits they used were spoon bit, and not like our twist bits. So that is, again, and it's a little tricky to use a spoon bit. So yeah, I used actually an auger bit to make the holes for the pegs in the posts, which probably wasn't authentic.
But their saws and planes and chisels looked a lot like ours.
Yes. Any comments or questions?
I was wondering, this is Alan Olson. I was wondering, in the one shot where you're sitting at the short bed with the dragon decoration, around the corner on the floor was a chest. I was wondering if that was a recreated toolbox of something I've seen of the area, or is that just a nice blanket chest that you made?
It was one that was modified from the Master Mirror chest. It's shorter. It's not got the dimensions of the Master Mirror chest, but it's built in the same general way. It's a 6-board chest.
Does anybody know the source of iron for the tools that the blacksmith was making? Was it right out of a mine, or was it bog iron, or does anybody know that?
Oh, he's talking about that chest right there. Yeah, yeah, that chest.
Yeah. They they did smelt bog iron.
You should be.
They didn't exactly mine. Their mining was not a big thing with the Vikings, but they were big traders, and they may have also had access to iron from people who did mine.
Interestingly, if you go to Lonzo Meadows to see Lava Ericsson's camp, one of the areas the archaeologists are interested in was determining whether they did any making of iron from bog iron. One of the buildings was actually a blacksmith's building, and when we were there, an archaeologist was working on a section of the camp, and they had found some waste from the smelting process, but she thought it was several hundred years later than the Viking Age. So then they kind of lost interest. But yeah, they did make iron from bog iron.
What exactly is
Yeah.
bog iron?
Probably wouldn't have had anything else.
Yeah.
We've got a blacksmith online here with me.
Oh, good.
Wait a minute, I don't know why I can't hear him. Okay, they use bog iron extensively. And my favorite theory at Lanza Meadow. Hold on, Bruce, give me phrases. Somewhere on a dock in what was it? Iceland or Greenland. Somebody left a bucket full of ship rivets. So when they needed repairs, they had to start from scratch. Just a theory, he says.
Yeah.
But they use bog iron.
And
And
bog
in
iron,
Lanza Meadow, and this is something that I know from Lanza Meadow myself, there were fire pits apart from the longhouses. You can see them a distance away from the longship. I mean, the longhouses. There are 3 fire pits that were specifically for the blacksmiths that ran up to a much higher temperature than the cooking fires. So, and that's one of the reasons we also know that the Vikings were there, was because we found the bog iron being worked there.
Yeah, but back home in Norway, the Vikings may have traded and got some other types of iron as well. That's some people in our reenactment group have tried making bog iron, and they've done it with varying success. There are some who have made bog iron and got it to work to make usable tools, and then there have been other attempts that have not been so good.
He said it makes good ship rivets and not good swords.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what they were probably doing at Lonzo Meadows, repairing their ship, probably.
Yeah.
I'm a blacksmith myself, and I have dabbled a little bit with bog iron. But just the thought of it gives me the heebie-jeebies. The amount of fuel that it would take, and the amount of digging up of bog and try and extract tiny amounts of iron out of it. And if you were trying to make something like, well, a large knife or a saw or something, the manpower is just, it kind of boggles my mind. I don't know if they're bringing a lot of things with them, trading and just bringing them with you, maybe doing a little modifications later. But
Yeah, well, everything that the Vikings had, when you think about the work, it boggles your mind. If you think about trying to build a longship, not only do you need the rivets, you need the wood, which they were very short of in some places like Iceland and Greenland. You also need the sail. And there have been calculations done indicating that it literally would take a village to be able to raise enough sheep or flax, spin enough fiber, and weave enough to make a sail for one ship.
Yeah, we've been working on that as well for our ship. We have a 42-foot long right now, and we've gone through a 26-foot and a 32-foot in the last 30, 40 years of
Yeah,
reenactment.
That's
We
the
went-
Longship Company, isn't it?
we
Yeah.
went to the Viking Ship Museum at Roskilde and watched the woman who was weaving on a sail for a Viking ship on the warp-weighted loom. And when she realized I was staring at it with more than average interest, she started to talk to me. And she spoke enough English that we were able to understand one another. And she told me that she, on the warp-weighted loom, could weave about half a meter if she worked all day. And this is half a meter of a width that would still need many, many lengths sewn together to make the actual sail. And she didn't introduce herself and didn't wear a name tag because she was in Viking garb. And when I looked her up when I got home, I realized it was Anna Ostergaard, who is probably the best warp-weighted loom weaver in the world.
So that's pretty high standard, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I
don't
got to
feel so
talk
bad
about
now.
I got to talk about the smelting a little bit. At Borg, if you go down to the you go down the road to a lake, and they have a Viking boat there. But off to the side, there is a blacksmith shop, and then off a little bit to the side, there's a grin building. And underneath that, they reconstructed a smelting furnace, and the archaeologists got the furnace up and running and made some iron, and they wrote a paper about it. I was interested in it because they also constructed the grin building over it, and so it was really fascinating to have seen the paper where they talk about the building, how they made it and what the joints are like, and then to actually see that building, and it was all there to protect the smelting furnace, and that was really fascinating.
the furnace that we built to do a little smelting was basically a disposable thing with clay. We used fire brick just because, not in entirety, mostly bentonite, clay, and water, and but it wasn't meant to last. You just, every time you smelt, you make another one. Yeah, it seems hard to believe that you could make a permanent furnace. I think you'd have to rebuild them fairly often and have a supply of clay.
I don't think this was permanent. I think they used it once, and that was it.
No, I think if you think about our oven, which was obviously not burned as hot as a smelting furnace, we built our oven out of sand and mud and straw and over a basket to shape it. And we expected that it would last for a season or two. It was still used this past last year at UW Green Bay. We are actually even able to move it, surprisingly, considering its weight. Now, true, it wasn't as hot temperatures, but it makes the point that if you can keep it out of the elements, something like that that's made of clay can last through quite a number of firings. not forever. Same thing with the Wattle and Daub. I mean, there are Wattle and Daub buildings all over England, which has a damp climate too. And my thought is that they were constantly working on them. And similarly with the sod, everybody knows that sod buildings have to be rebuilt from time to time. But we're thinking about a culture where everybody spent all their time on necessary work. There was no such thing as going away from your home to your job. You work around your home unless you're a trader and you're off trading, and then your wife supervises the thralls who are working around your home.
Mhm.
Want to give
So-
them the old line, the secret of Viking navigation was they didn't have to be at work Monday morning.
Well, they did cross, you know, fairly quickly. They actually, Leif Erikson probably made it to the New World much more quickly than most of you who have immigrant ancestors, than most of your ancestors did. I mean,
My
they
ancestors took 6 weeks, so that was, yeah.
yeah, and we really think that the Vikings could do it in less than 2 weeks.
Now, when you read, I know you guys read the sagas. Do you notice things that you might not have noticed before you built your own house?
You know, we actually, I don't know what to say. I haven't found anything that I would change from the way we did it.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we spent numerous trips checking things out.
Mhm.
And we spent, before I actually designed it and built it. And then after we built it, we've gone back and seen Vosnes and Borg and Greenland. And again, I wouldn't have changed anything. So no, not right now. There's nothing that I really wanted to change.
I was more like, did you get more insight in reading it? Not that you would have changed something, but things make more sense.
Yeah, I think we did, not only from building it, but from traveling around and seeing the places where the sagas actually happened. But yeah, I mean, just as one very simple example, there are stories in the sagas about eye doctors who came traveling around and people flocking to see them. Well, after finding out the effect of the smoke on your eyes when you don't have to live in the loghouse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, we began to understand, yeah, of course, eye doctors were very valuable because everybody had eye ailments.
From all the smoke, yeah, interesting. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great presentation.